Howdy folks, greetings from Reykjavik Harbour. I just landed in yesterday, starting off my Iceland tour tonight with my guests. Can't wait. I just got word from Fujifilm Hong Kong about what's going to be announced at the X Summit. That's actually in Sydney, right when this is going live. And we have two new cameras, two new lenses, ranging from down at the hype end of the spectrum up to the pro end of the spectrum. And I wanted to talk you through it. Now, I have to acknowledge this is based on 4 press releases that I've been sent and product photos that the team very kindly shot for me because they didn't actually have the official ones yet. And it's not having been hands-on with it and not being at the X event. I was at the X event in Tokyo for the X100 a couple of months ago. And that atmosphere is cool, but I have to say, sometimes seeing it there in black and white, without the hype, without the marketing, without all of the excitement, you can see things more objectively and start to notice when things aren't mentioned or kind of read between the lines a little bit. But I want to acknowledge that I haven't been hands-on with it, and the information I have is all I have to go off. So it could be that, you know, changes are made to the press release before it's all launched. So this is a conversation. A lot of this, I want your feedback for you Fuji users. I know you're very passionate. I've felt your wrath before, so please forgive me if I get any of this wrong. But I wanted to talk it through with you because I really do think there's some interesting things here. So let's start out at what I referred to as the hype end of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is, look, there are a lot of pros and great photographers shooting with Fuji. I'm not throwing any shade, but you have to acknowledge the X100 series, it's a hype camera now. Yes, there are great photographers, pro photographers, experienced, amazing, I'm sure a lot of you are watching, who also shoot with that camera and love it. But 95% of the coverage you see, 95% of the waiting list is flippers and influencers and people who, again, no shade, who maybe don't have a background in photography, but want it because it's the it camera to have. It's the hype camera of the moment, and because it's physically beautiful. Be honest, have you seen more photos of the camera or more photos taken with the camera? I personally think I've seen more photos of people setting up a shot with the camera, taking a behind the scenes. They seem to do the best. We've got a seaplane flying through here. Now, why I say the newly announced XT50 is down at the hype end, and I shouldn't say down at, but on that part of the spectrum, is I believe that the XT30 Mark II and cameras in that kind of ballpark have seen a big bump in their sales, I think, and it's been speculated, related to the wait list for the X100. People can't get that, but they still want to be on the Fuji train with that retro look. So they get one of the more entry-level interchangeable lens bodies. And having heard from you guys who are maybe more experienced photographers, or anyone really, who what they like from the camera other than the ergonomics and the hype is the ability to shoot in JPEG, use Fuji's fantastic color profiles, their film simulations, and then just share the JPEG straight out of camera. Whereas on your main camera, you might be shooting raw, processing it, and then sharing it. This is kind of a bit more of a fun camera. You shoot it in JPEG, use the film simulation, boom, just share it out. Well, the XT50 is marking out its place in that realm by putting a big old film simulation dial on the top deck. Now, what do you guys think of that? If that's one of the big reasons you're getting Fuji, then why the hell not? It makes sense to have it there, right? I don't know that I love the look of the dial, not that that's really such a big thing, but it's not really costing anything. That was replacing the mode dial, the drive dial, so what frames per second and that kind of thing you're shooting, and that's easily tucked away in a menu. And for a camera like this that more people may be looking for the film simulations, then yeah, I can see that that actually does make sense. This is going from the 26.1 megapixel sensor up to the new 40.2 megapixel sensor, which brings new demands for your lenses, which we'll get to on the lens that's been announced. And I really hope that there are more updates to the lenses. You can check out my X100 video. I was perfectly honest in that. I don't think the latest Fuji X100, that its lens is up to 40 megapixels, and more detailed lab studies have borne that out. So the fact that they're replacing lenses like the 18 to 55 with updated optics to handle that resolution is great. It is the highest resolution APS-C sensor on the market. Doing pretty well off the old memory, but let's check some notes. Okay, so one thing I was told that the XT50 isn't replacing the XT30 Mark II, it's a new kind of line sitting above that. It's using the same 1.84 million dot rear LCD. It's got a refined grip and layout, more rounded. The button placement has also been refined a bit, I'm guessing, to put it more in line with things like the X100. It's got the latest processor, latest engine, the CMOS 5HR sensor, 5-axis image stabilization, all the other things that you're going to expect from this camera. Still got the pop-up flash. The main thing is that we're getting the film simulation dial on top. Now, let's just jump quickly. There's 4 things here, so I don't want to take too long, to the new lens. The 18-55 XF lens, XF, if you don't know, is the more professional weather-sealed metal foot mount compared to the XC. Was a great standard kit lens, 18-55 f2.8 to f4 variable aperture. The new one is 16-50, so 2 mil wider, but 5 mil shorter. So it's 10% shorter and it's a slower aperture. So the old one was f2.8 to f4. This is f2.8 to f4.8. What do you think about that? Shorter and slower. I don't know. One cool thing though, it is extremely lightweight. I think it's the lightest weight of any of the XF lenses to date, and they are generally fairly lightweight to begin with. It's also giving you pretty close focus, which gets you something like half a macro, so 0.5 reproduction ratio. It's still weather sealed, and I think they're saying that this one, when you zoom, it no longer extends the length of the body. Weight of only 240 grams, which is pretty spectacular. So it's actually 0.3 at the telephoto end, which they're saying is then 0.45 in 35 mil term, which is close to being half macro, but not really. This is just it's not a Fuji specific thing. A lot of the manufacturers play a bit loose and fast with the facts, and there's lots of bullet points and references about disclaimers and stuff as you go through. And we're going to see that in the GFX section that we're getting to now. If you are a GFX user, both of these new products sound fantastic on paper, and I'll be getting them in as soon as possible to add to my Fuji GFX setup guide. Check that out if you haven't already. It takes you through the entire range, including the older bodies, showing you how to initially set them up, what all of the physical controls do, and how you can customize them for your style of shooting. And the GFX 100S Mark II is going to be a great addition to that line. Now, here's something that I find funny. The way companies word their releases can really muddy the water. I know it's marketing jargon, it's not a Fuji specific thing, all of the brands do it. But for example, they can make it really unclear whether it is really a new sensor or what parts of the sensor are new or whether it's not. Earlier I saw references to things like a new sensor and processor combo, which then, does that mean the processor's new or the sensor's new or they're both new? It's not clear. In this time, they're saying that this is newly developed sensor. Now, if you look up the definition of developed, that could mean that it's inception, that it's been newly created from scratch, or it could mean that it's newly refined. And so it's an existing something that's had further refinements done to it. And I think it's the latter. I think this is still, the base is the same 102 megapixel sensor that is 5 years old now, that we saw on the GFX 100 in June 2019. That's not a bad thing. 5 years is a long time in technology terms, but it's still an exceptional sensor. The interesting thing though, they're saying is that it's a new high-speed sensor. And the couple of things from the press release that jumped out at me, let me just read it to you. With the development of the 102 megapixel high-speed sensor GFX 100 megapixel CMOS 2, and the improved readout speed, along with the newly developed shutter drive, it achieves a continuous shooting performance of 7 frames per second. But nowhere does it specify the improved readout speed. What it was, what it is now, what that's going to do for rolling shutter in video, or any of that kind of thing. Now, maybe that will come out at the Fuji Summit. I'm sure somebody in the weeks and months to come will actually test it and see what the readout speed is, if that has been changed. So to me, readout speed suggests the electronics layer behind the sensor has been improved. It also says the sensor's micro lenses have been improved to increase light efficiency at the sensor edges, which improves image quality and AF accuracy, which suggests that the layer of micro mirrors on top of the sensor have been refined. But the actual pixel size, I'm not sure. But there is one thing here that makes me think maybe it's more than just a refresh of the old one. They say improvement to the pixel structure has boosted the sensor's saturated electrons. I don't know what that means. Boosted the new sensor's saturated electrons, thereby enabling the use of ISO 80 as a standard sensitivity. My feeling is just that if this were a whole brand new, from the ground up, 102 megapixel sensor, they would be shouting about it rather than kind of hinting at the three main sections of the sensor have been updated independently and not joining the dots together. When there's an improvement, they really hammer it home. So it's not that it's necessarily a big deal either way. We know it's a fantastic sensor. If it is getting faster, great. It also has pixel shift for up to 400 megapixel images. It's got 20 film simulations, including Real-Ace, and at least in Hong Kong, it looks significantly cheaper than the original GFX 100S was at launch. Out of all of the GFX cameras, if I wasn't going for the 50R, which I just kind of have a thing for, of the current range, the GFX 100S would have been my choice, and now I would say the S Mark II would be. Now, to the lenses, and talk about just getting the job done. Damn, Fuji, knocking it out of the park. 500mm f5.6 LM OIS WR, weather-resistant lens. So they already had a gigantic 250mm lens. That was an f4. So this is twice the length, only one stop slower. So, you would assume we're going to have optical elements in there potentially twice as big in terms of surface area, because we're only losing one stop. But this thing is tiny and light. It's 100 grams lighter than the absolutely tiny 500mm f5.6 Nikon PF lens for DSLR. So lighter than that. Honestly, fairly incredible. So at 500mm, you're talking 390. So 500mm in GFX, that's the equivalent of 396mm in full frame. And you can use the 1.4 times teleconverter, which will get you out to 700mm, an equivalent of 554. So this is, for people who are doing long lens stuff like I'm going to be doing here in Iceland, shooting birds, shooting wildlife, who really want that crazy long reach and want to be able to do it with a huge sensor camera. I still kind of find it funny. As I said, all brands, exaggerate and use a little bit of sleight of hand, but I still find it quite ridiculous that Fuji call these large format as one of the preeminent film stock manufacturers. This is baby medium format in the same way that Hasselblads are. It's not large format. But I have to say, I think one of the cutest phrases here is that this lens adopts a luxurious lens construction of 14 groups and 21 elements. So I would say a highly complex rather than luxurious, including 2 super EDs, 5 ED, which is of course for suppressing your chromatic aberrations and da-da-da-da-da. So this is pretty incredible. We're gonna have a brand new GFX camera with a faster readout speed at a lower price than the original one, in still that tiny form factor, and a 500mm lens it must be just about the smallest and lightest 500/5.6 on the market, despite the fact that it's for medium format. We've got the XT50 to help hopefully share the hype burden of the X100 series and to get people moving up into the X range of interchangeable lenses. Face it, lenses is where a lot of the money is for these companies. And then the new standard zoom lens, the 16-50, with the slower and shorter long end. Whew. Thank you, Fuji, for letting me get this information ahead of time. Shame I couldn't get hands-on with it, but as soon as I get back to Hong Kong, I'll be trying to get all 4 of them in. Let me know what you would like to see tested with them. Let me know what you think of the announcements, and if you are a GFX shooter, please do check out my setup guide. I also have them available for Sony Alpha, Nikon Z, and Hasselblad. Links to all of that will be below. Cheers guys, I'll see you soon. Time to go meet my group.